Please welcome our first reader. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Stacie Denetsosie. My first genre is fiction, and this is called Reservation State of Mind.
Stacie, keep the mic a little bit closer to you. You can kind of tip it down a little bit if you'd like.
Right there.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I was buying a bag of black Cheetos for Mom and Dad at the Circle K when I overheard them by the black packaged magazines. I held 2 Arizona teas, a bottle of Coke, and a cold red Gatorade for Grandma. The hot days scalded our nerves and needed to take a break from all the planning. Dad had gone to the flea market earlier that week to buy a saddle for Richard's funeral. He had chosen a mahogany-stained one with supple leather. Richard would have liked it. Tears stung inside my nose. I fought the sensation, but the burning extended up to my eyes. I couldn't cry anymore. The mourning period was over. Grandma had sent me to the gas station to get me out of the house. She told me not to cry anymore, and that grief didn't offer comfort to the dead. Her words were harsh but loving. She stroked my back until she had to leave for her dialysis, which left her shrunken and gray. That's what defined Navajo women most. They had strong minds, but their bodies couldn't always keep up. The cowbell clanged, pulling me from my thoughts. 2 Navajo men walked into the gas station, and the security monitor recorded their movements between bouts of noiseless static. One rested his coal-stained elbows on the edge of the counter, depositing money from his Friday paycheck from Peabody Coal Company. I wondered if they knew my father. They didn't look older than 40, wearing sweat-stained t-shirts and cinched jeans. One man sported a Stetson hat, the brim stained with salt and red sand. The other man flipped casually through a women's health magazine before reaching for the Navajo Times on the counter. I shouldn't have flinched, but I did. The Navajo Times covered my brother's death. When nothing happened in a small town, a murder was a big deal, and I didn't like how public his death felt. I didn't think that his life story and death coverage should be so accessible. Yellow Horse's kid passed. Says he got jumped by a gang after school by the Canto water tower, the one in the Stetson hat said. My Cheetos fell to the floor. Chester the cheetah smiled up at me as a barbed wire fist twisted in my gut. My stomach lurched as I thought the memory of Richard splayed out on the concrete wearing a black Native American church pullover. His slick black bun sagged below his neck as his Adam's apple bobbed like a stick shift through broken gears. I can remember the blood-splattered glinting in the flashing lights, pulsing red and blue, his head haloed by shattered 40 bottles. I couldn't recognize him. His face was beaten in so bad, he looked like ground beef. Everyone loved Richard. He had a brand of confidence that rode along the bend of his shoulders. He bore it there. School served as another stepping stone for Richard. He breezed through it, occasionally reaching down from his cloud of progress to swipe my fingers. We were convinced that he would graduate from college and become the next Navajo president, because Richard would. The air conditioner sputtered on, and I looked up at the security monitor to see if the men had left. They had. Pulling the drinks tighter into my arms, I approached Deb's counter. She had been a food market attendant for as long as I can remember, always sniffing potted perfume samples she couldn't afford. A picture of her granddaughter fluttered, disturbed by the AC above her head. I'd seen the picture before, a little round-faced baby swallowed up by a Pendleton blanket and framed by a fan and gourd set. Deb had gotten a pixie cut a while back. She wanted to look like Jennifer Lawrence in the new Cosmo issue, but her Indian hair didn't lie back fine like Jennifer's. Instead, it poked up in all directions like a cat in heat. Deb looked up from behind the monitor, her eyes swelling with tears. Sorry about Richard. He was a good kid, she said, scanning my items. I stared at her brown hands, fingernails long, white, and clean. Outside the window, a stray dog wandered past, clumps of fur peeling from her back like most res dogs. When I didn't answer, Deb looked out the window, tracing my gaze. I didn't like it when people asked me about Richard. No charge. I nodded. A tear streamed down her flat, broad cheek. Pulling my items in my chest, I walked out the door, letting the cowbell clank behind me. Richard's Ford Ranger smelled like horse sweat, sage, and sand. After setting the sack in the passenger seat, I popped open my Coke, listening to the fizzle of the carbonation. It felt like a release, kind of. I knew that Richard kept his Camels under the seat. He didn't keep smoking as a regular habit. It served solely to relieve stress, and in a few months' time, it would belong to the passing fads of Skoal and Dr. Pepper, both vices cured after he mistakenly swigged a can of his own spit. The cigarette was his new fix, which I supported for the smell. I shifted the car into reverse and pulled out of the Circle K parking lot. I fumbled for the Camel package under the seat and tipped one out of the package and into my mouth. I relished the feel of the paper stem. Switching to one hand on the wheel, I reached for the lighter. Bringing the now glowing coil to my mouth, I eased the tip of my cigarette into the orange center. The tip caught. I watched as white consumed orange until it darkened into a rusty brown. I didn't know how to smoke cigarettes. I'd only had tobacco at the Native American church meetings. 15-year-olds weren't supposed to smoke, unless they snuck out at night and smoked a cigarette. I felt like an adult when I did. I loved holding the borrowed stem between my fingers and attempting to puff perfect rings. I liked pursing my lips and swinging my hips like it was Marilyn Monroe or something. It made me feel sexy. I longed to wear lipstick and be desirable, but I had few curves and none of them monumental. I had a topography as flat as Kayenta. I longed to be thought of like Richard, thought of as successful and grown up. He had a magnetism that I didn't, because everyone at this grocery store knew his name. We get stopped down every aisle, people asking him about his schooling. The whole while, I just stood there. Nobody cared what I was doing. They were too enveloped in Mr. Future Navajo President. And I wondered if Richard could see me now, driving 60 down the road in his Ranger, one hand on the steering wheel, and the other tapping out the burnt edges of my Camel into the ashtray like a real woman. When Richard did catch me smoking, he would stop me immediately. He'd tell me that my brain still had to grow. He'd tell me that he wouldn't want me to be a Chiji monkey for the rest of my life. Okay. And now I'm going to read my poetry selection. All right. The theory of spitting seeds. Crack. David's sunflower seeds in the cab of a truck. A Chevy Silverado encases 3 generations of 4 brown nuts. Buckets in hand, our lips reminisce the season of the ripened pinon pines and sift through the cones that hide their little brown bodies. Spit. Turn tradition on your tongue. Language is an acrobat in your mouth. Bite down hard and taste preservation. Load the shells between your teeth and gums. Swallow. It's hard to spit up tradition when swallowing seeds. Call me Stowe. When I look at my face, it's covered in ick. It must seep out of my Indian pores. I wash my face so it doesn't shine, and it's not covered in Stowe. I floss and brush my teeth so I don't have ick. Some assume that I was a stowaway in my mama's womb, but nobody knew because Papa was a never home Stowe. Word is he drank himself sick. Ick, ick. Lucky for me, Mama's a hardworking Stowe. We work hard to keep the ick off. But the other day, in a serious days, someone asked me why I look so damn stoic. And that's all I have time for, so thank you.
It's on, Shaun.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Shaun Anderson, and I will be reading a nonfiction piece entitled A Gay Mormon's Guide to Navigating the Spiritual Fall. 1. When you want to die, keep walking. The roof of the dorms will seem like a gateway to heaven. It's not. Keep walking. When people whisper fag, queer, and homo behind your back, when friends decide to walk out of your life because you tell them about the guy you can't stop thinking about, when they tell you an all-loving God doesn't have the room to love you, just keep walking. 2. When your mother cries, hold her. A part of you will wonder why she has the right to cry about this, when her faith rejects and hates you. You'll realize later that this is her journey too. Her dreams for you have shattered. She loves you, but she must watch as the world turns and walks away from you. Hold her, because no one deserves to carry all of that pain alone. Hold her, because the two of you together have the strength to survive this. 3. Allow his fingers to entwine with yours for the first time. Feel whole for the first time as he holds your hand. You won't feel condemned or cursed or even slightly like the abomination that you've spent your whole life telling yourself that you are. His hand will be strong and it will feel right in yours. The world will be open to the two of you and you will feel it. You'll cling on to that hand and you'll make plans for a future with a husband and children. 4. Cry when he leaves. Cry because you loved him. Cry because that voice in the back of your mind that you finally learned to tune out, that voice that echoes the word abomination constantly, that voice will be back. Cry because you feel empty. Cry because there's nothing else that you can do. You'll look in the mirror and you'll fixate on all the parts of you that you've secretly hated from the beginning. You'll see your bushy eyebrows and your slender arms. You will know that these are the reasons why he left. 5. Let yourself be angry with God. Pray. Start by saying, Heavenly Father, I hate you, and feel it. The memories of 1,000 church meetings will make you feel guilty because hating God has been labeled as a sin. You won't want to feel this way. Let yourself feel all of it. You've spent too long denying the way you feel, so for once open up your heart and release everything that eats away at you. Tell God how angry you are that he made you gay. Tell him how furious you are that he's created a church where believers preach hate against you. Tell him exactly what you feel and then climb to your feet and walk away. 6. Make your relationship with God entirely your own business. Eventually the hatred will fade. If it doesn't fade naturally, convince yourself to let it go. You spent too long hating too much. Just let it leak away from your soul. There's a chance you'll learn to love him. If it happens, it will happen slowly, and it won't happen because anyone else told you to love him. It will happen because you choose to love. 7. Realize that as you let the hate toward God seep out of your soul, slowly the same hatred of self will leak away. Fall in love with the depths of your own brown eyes. Discover that your own laughter is your favorite sound. Take pride in the way that you are learning each day to become more and more true to the you that you've always wanted to be. Months later, stand on the roof of that dorm and be amazed by the beautiful world that stretches out around you, filled with greens, reds, yellows, blues, and browns. You'll be glad you decided to never jump. Thank you.
I'm Terysa Dyer, and I will be reading from the graduate poetry, and then I'll have time for an excerpt from my graduate nonfiction as well. On the noises in the office, late nights. 1. They intoned, "It's haunted, you know," and we knew only that they meant to quake our hearts or prick our necks at the back with affright when we worked there late nights. They were the wise, the second-year vets. We couldn't reject what they said, though we tried. 2. The Raby West Building, 1918. Neither yet named so, nor yet part of our Utah State University. No classes for English. No. A military barracks. Training grounds for fighters going rounds in the first brawl for all the world. How many men, for they were men only then, walked the first floors of these halls, worked there late nights, dreaming without the foresight to dream of the violence ahead, of the ghosts they would wake one day to find in themselves by that war's end. 3. We worked there late nights, ate gummy worms under fluorescent lights, graded papers, and wrote them in a cycle that made our eyes see things we dared not report to each other. The stories they told, those wise, those second-year vets, shined like laptop screens in our minds, but the fun of all-nighters and writing parties dissipated when the rest of them went home to quiet beds, and I stayed upstairs alone. Yes, alone, grading just 2 more papers. Why not alone? And the noises on the landing couldn't be my friends gone home. I'm there alone, and the rain on the office roof wasn't falling, not like my bravado. And maybe, once alone, I heard someone call down the upstairs hall and looked to find my mind had tricked me. Maybe the stories they told us, to tease us, to try us, were true. Census. Utah has youngest newlyweds. Deseret News. Young bodies bound with vows lie in their own houses now. They hesitate, devout down to their underwear, tremble with downtrodden wonder and unveiled virgin pleasures. Wedding bells ring them home alone together, where mission letters bind like fetters. Strained sex does not inspire, just enough to procreate. Speak, speak up, let him know your needs, as if you could. Seasonal fruit. Summertime seeps like dripping water rolls off the round bodies of red raspberries and through tilted little ladders of holes into the ditch water sink bottom. But some drip droplets cling to the dark, sweet things, bend into memories of lava tag on the playground with a little sister, later waving goodbye as I drive up the lane, and she drifts toward adulthood, age 10. And then I have time for just an excerpt out of my nonfiction. Apology. I woke up and knew. I hoped for the impossible chance you'd popped back home and grabbed her, or that I'd fallen asleep before you left and dreamed it all. But I knew. I'm sorry for the voicemail I left on your phone after you didn't answer it the first 2 times. The one where I cried, out of breath, asking in half sentences whether you knew where Sierra was. I can only imagine your reaction when you got that message. Did you run to the car? Did you abandon the cart with the squeaky wheel, leave it filled with kid cuisine TV dinners and hamburger helper? I'm sure you broke the speed limit driving home. I'm sorry you thought you were a single mother. I called Sierra's name until my calls came out in airy gasps between the sobs. After 2 laps around our building, I hunted between parked cars, fought every version of the worst as I looked at each road and each doorway in a different way than ever before. And then I met the deepest hurt a heart can feel when, after a tall police officer approached me on the sidewalk with Sierra there in his uniformed arms, I stretched out my own arms and reached for her. Sierra was there, alive, smiling, looking down at me from her perch on his hip, and the officer shifted her away, shielded her from me, refused to let me reassure my racing heart against the weight of her small body. He lectured me. He asked if I knew what the word neglect meant and tortured me with his own version of the awful things that might have happened, how lucky it was for me that he'd been there. All the while he held her out of my reach. He wouldn't let me grope for her and clasp her to my barely budded breast until he was sure that I would never sleep so easily again. In my room, in a heap on the floor, I cried down to the crown of her head until I heard the door slam open. I remember how you swooped in, how you ripped her from my arms and held her like I'd tried to sell her. I remember the angry, angry tears on your cheeks, your primal lunge of protection for your baby, and my primal cringe away. I told you then, as I tell you now, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and I kept on telling you through body sobs and through your locked bedroom door how sorry I was. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hanson, and I'm going to be reading first from my creative nonfiction piece and then from my poetry. Turn on my timer so I don't go over. Okay. So this is part 4, firsts. On my wedding day, a bee stung me for the first time. It landed on my arm during the first photograph in the orchard under the weeping willow. At first, I thought a pin lingered in the silk and lace of my dress. The pain pushed in deep, a sliver sinking far into my skin. But when I raised my arm to look, I saw the hard pink spot, the stinger still visible, haloed in white. The spot itched for a week after, and even now a bump remains on my right wrist, the venom still lingering. At 8 years old, I realized that Mormon girls live with a few specific expectations of themselves. First, they will get married in the temple, which follows without saying and therefore doesn't even merit its own point on this list, and they will remain virgins until marriage. To my knowledge, my mother never told me to save myself for marriage, but when I called in tears to tell her that James and I were moving in together, she told me she never wanted this life for me, and she hoped I would come back to church one day. I didn't have the courage to tell her I never would. In Sunday school, we glued school pictures, over white, half-dried craft paint on a wooden block cut in the shape of the famous temple in Salt Lake City. We picked favorite temples in class, the teachers like wedding planners detailing the amenities, the grounds, the perks of each location. Most of us weren't old enough to name any other than the Salt Lake Temple, though I suspect it remains everyone's secret favorite. Our photographs went where the doors would be to represent our entrance. Over the door, the famous line, "I'm going there someday," from a popular Mormon song for children curled, intimate, around my photograph. Sometimes, even now, I find myself humming that song, a last reminder of a church that tried to make itself a part of me early, and instead left a sliver behind and fell away to die. I found that wooden temple, my photograph dusty and wrinkled with age, while cleaning out my bedroom. I remembered putting it away, shoving it underneath elementary school award certificates and notebooks full of notes from middle school science class. The items I chose to keep held a sort of mystique to me, the temple in particular. I can't say I remembered the way it felt to make that piece, but the lumpy paint, the haphazard glue job that let the photograph lift at the edges led me to believe a certain lack of care came into play. Still, in that photograph, I smiled from the door of the temple, unaware that I would never enter. Those words, "I'm going there someday," seemed so appropriate. The quote mentions getting to the temple. It says nothing about entering. Looking at that wooden temple, I thought of weddings of family members and loved ones. Each time I stood outside and waited, unable to attend their ceremony, unworthy, or at least that's how I felt in the moment, put upon. But I chose to leave the church. I chose to break its laws even if I didn't believe them. The church still sends me cookies with annoying messages of fellowship taped to the cellophane, and I threw each and every one in the trash untasted. Every wedding left me with half moons of sweat under my arms and a sunburn, no matter the time of year, and the flowers at the temple were always blooming and full of bees. I wondered at each of those weddings if the first time a bee stung me, I'd find out that I had a severe bee allergy, like the kid in a movie I once saw as a child. I couldn't imagine a more terrible way to find out anything, with a prick of pain and then a horrible death. On my wedding day, a bee stung me for the first time. I felt pain, hot and piercing, and yet for all of that, a strange sense of calm, of some sort of inevitability, like somehow I'd always known I couldn't go my whole life without being stung, that no matter what I did, that prick was inevitable, and what it left behind would be unforgettable. As soon as I lifted my arm to look at the sting, my mother started scratching it with her short, sharp fingernails. "This will make it better," she kept saying. "This will make it so it doesn't hurt." And I told her to stop. The burning in my arm spread when she worried at it, and I feared it would consume me. I pushed my mother's hand away and said, "That won't work." Okay, these are my poems. This one's called Labor. What does it mean to be a mother? Are you full of fragments? Your nose, your eyes, your hair, repeated on a smaller scale, a human fractal? When my mother felt me move, did she sense delicate fingers grasping for her thrumming heart, each beat the blink of a startled eye closing to avoid pain? They say we hear with bones as well as ears, like whales hear. Those inner echoes give us the sounds of our own voices. I wonder then, did my mother hear me stirring in her belly, the sound of an ocean in the shell? Or was she too full to echo, the spaces inside her made solid with me, baby coos stopped between belly and brain? And did she know love which set me going, fed on her even then? Did she fear the wet, bald creature she called daughter, waiting to devour in one push, matricide in a moment? But could I have lingered like an unwelcome guest, afraid to knock? I stained her shaking thighs, slick, oil of catechumens. On that first night she felt me move, rocking like a cradle. Did she fear something else shuffled towards Bethlehem? This one's called Resurrection. You, moth in a mason jar, memory held in a conservatory of bone. You knock on the inside of my skull. What a racket you make, echoing between ears, your lightest touch striking like a fist. But I can't keep you locked in me, you exist. I fear I'll find you ordering turkey sandwiches for two, drinking a pint with a floating slice of orange. What a din you'll make inside me then, as you compare hair, face, manner of dress to that version of you which must suffocate soon, my head screwed on too tight for breathing room. I've driven a pin through your abdomen, pressed you between mental layers of glass. Why can't I look at you like something already dead, with limited interest? Why must you act the part of Lazarus? Why must you rise, miraculous? And this is my last one, it's called Pompeii. I look at children and understand why people believe in God. While dead deities lie entombed in scientific tomes, heads back, mouths open, salt white, as if struck at once by a breath of hot ash, children emerge from human flesh. Though we know how they are conceived, carried, cut from their mothers, We still wonder at the life we make, as if afraid to credit ourselves, divine creators. I too look away from the red-hot epicenter of my power, dormant now, perhaps for fear of what I will unearth when my body cools.
Yeah? Oh, there it is. Hi, so my name is Jordan Floyd. I'm going to be reading a fiction piece that I wrote, obviously, called The Wind Cries Mary. And real quick, just before I know I'm not supposed to do this, but just so you understand what the hell I'm talking about. My main characters refer to God as Uncle Cool. It's a derivation of the Zulu word Uncle Unkulu, which means God. And this where it's situated, my main character is about ready to, surprise, go on a trip on drugs. All of you know me, that's funny. Anyway, First Hill enclosed Sama rather quickly and unexpectedly. He saw it as a sanctuary or labyrinth, but one without sinister intentions, one that promised a perpetually enjoyable stroll throughout time and space and everything scientists had yet to discover. The steps on which he sat waved like children's hands at a parade toward him, undoubtedly, toward him. And his beaming smile, which he had not realized was growing long across his face and becoming increasingly heavier the wider it got. Sama believed the tea was working, at least it probably was working, but it may have been the tap, although he knew he wouldn't be able to tell the difference because he never experienced either. Yes, this made sense, and better yet, he didn't have to spend time deciphering the nuances of the two hallucinogenic staples because many people before him, like Timothy Leary, had long since completed this work, stamped it, and sent it to the President of the whole fucking United States for approval. Surely, yes, surely, this was the case, Sam thought. But certainty proved unattainable for Sam as he lost track of where he was on the St. James steps below the St. James Cathedral adjacent to O'Dade Catholic High School, which he thought, if anyone had to know, was on Bourne Avenue and only 3 blocks from the I-5 Express and a considerable distance west of Sammamish, where he lived and where he probably would not be sleeping that night, which didn't bother him or his dad because he would probably be working, although that didn't make much sense because last Sam checked it was the evening, and in the evenings it wasn't typical for adults to work. How profound, he thought. At this time, or sometime outside of this time, and a time only perceived by Zulu beings, he got up from the steps, turned his back to the waving hands, and traveled toward the St. James Cathedral tombstone that now curved high over his head in a gradual bend, sending the array of lichen and Celtic symbols and figures stretching off toward I-5 and Sammamish, which, he thought, if anyone had to know, was where he probably would not be sleeping that night. The inside of the cathedral was dim and wet, like how Sam imagined the inside of a lung would be. It surprised Sam it was still open. He remembered hearing the St. James clergy close the place up to keep the homeless and worse, high school kids from wandering through the cathedral at night when nobody except Uncle Cool was watching. Maybe it wasn't all that late, he thought, and further, maybe it was a lie, and the cathedral never closed because Uncle Cool actually wanted the homeless and high school teens wandering through the pews and lighting candles, and if they felt the need, burning the mass of stone and mortar dogma to the ground because that was Uncle Cool's way. He burned things to the ground to later build them back up. No, this idea seemed too tired to Sam, so he went and sat in the pew as he had with Sonny and Slush and Mary and cried a prayer, which really wasn't a prayer but a poem and a nasty one at that. Sam threw his head backwards. His eyes were closed and had been the entire time, but he still saw things which were undoubtedly not real, but he couldn't be certain because they looked real and waved. Everything waved, in fact, and Sam felt like he was in some cheesy 70s movie where the director made everything day-glow and rainbow and bursting, because culturally that's what was going on. That was the obvious revolution, but Sam knew this bullshit director missed the fucking point because the revolution was within, and within, well, fuck, it was nothing but pink and red guts, or were they purple? That was plausible because it was a known fact. Yes, fact, F-A-C-T, the blood was purple, or was it blue? Sam didn't know, but the poem still spewed out from underneath his teeth where the words felt tense, and it was a funny idea to Sam, who all along figured words lived on his tongue, but no, in this moment he realized they lived in and around his ivory white teeth. They played basketball on the peaks of his molars and probably fucked in the crevices of those same very teeth. Words fucking and making more words, birthing shitty ones and good ones, but they wouldn't know it until it came time for them to spew from Sam's mouth like they were now. And how unfair it was to give the words this kind of uncertainty, Sam thought. And here, yes here in the St. James motherfucking brothel, hotel, and casino, these words tried their luck to see if they'd make the cut. If Sama, oh Uncle Cool, high-rolling Sama would deem them good enough to resonate around the room and follow a linear path from wall to wall, pew to pew, pillar to pillar, cross to cross, candle to candle, altar to altar, painting of St. James to painting of St. James and hell. No, not the place, but the expression, Sama thought. Words inevitably found their way to mundane, vulgar expressions, and that's where they ended, began, lived truly, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
So my name is Lenches-Jhamb. Can you hear me? No? Do I have to stoop like that?
You can take that out of the.
I can just take it out?
Or you can wear the little
No,
one.
just. Okay, so I got 2 poems for you. The first one, this is called Elegy for Papaw in Ohio. Our Papaw's 96th birthday had arrived. Jordan and I steered the avalanche into Lebanon, Ohio, after crossing 500 miles of cattle-crap farmland. The Golden Lamb awaited us, the oldest inn in the state. We weren't its most illustrious guests. It had housed former presidents, but the occasion pardoned us, and most of them were dead anyway. 2. I unhinged the red velvet rope that sectioned off the room and stepped into the white-suited past of Mark Twain. It was his room, at least one he had spent a night in. White walls and creaky oak floors cried Huckleberry and Sawyer's secrets until I became deaf with wonder or drink and collapsed into a moldy green leather armchair I swore still held his musk. My eyes landed on Papaw, who had reached such an age that time ceased to worry about wrinkling him further. It certainly hadn't snatched away his brown tweed and golf hat of 15 years ago. Our eyes met in the dim light of the Elks Lodge, and his blue-eyed bewilderment spoke before either of us could. We sat as sunken ships in armchairs, surrounded by ceramic clowns that made me cringe and him smile. All weekend he chewed and chewed his beech nut tobacco while I whittled my memory back into him. I couldn't count how many times he leaned in with a conspiratorial grin only to ask, "Do you chew?" or "So you're right, huh?" But most frequent was, "Wow, he sure can play piano." Jordan spoke in another key, from another room. He knew Papaw's favorite, the Bells of Moscow, and played it with a passion I didn't possess. It was his way of saying goodbye to a near century of a man. Papaw bobbed to the melody, contented in his chair, a lip cemented to his cheek. At the door of the weekend and our visit, I held him, the man of more time than any man could hope for, and whispered, "I'll see you soon." This one's called The Day You Went to Jail. The day you went to jail, we stood statuesque outside my new apartment on the edge of campus. The exterior, red brick, nude siding, speckled with dirt and years of shame. The road wound several feet below, obscured by a thicket of green that perspired in the dry heat. I wanted to leave, to ascend those 6 concrete stairs offering their cold, turn left, and I'd be at my door. My eyes lowered to the cracked asphalt, a spider's web, and I, trapped, suspended between the said and unsaid. I wanted a disguise, so I slipped on my sunglasses, the Medusa emblem pair in not-so-conversation, but in disarming light I spoke words I couldn't, and that was all your freedom. Thanks.
Is this okay? Okay, perfect. My name is Jeannie Woller. I am nonfiction, and I will be reading my first piece, which is First Itch, and then a section from my second piece, which is titled Intense Garage Fire Kills a Sandy Father. Leather seats sucked our skin, so every move we made pried our flesh from the bus's brown cushioned bench. 9 inches between foot and ground, the Velcro on her shoe scraped the outside of my calf as our legs swung, synchronized back and forth. On the swing set, if our legs pumped in rhythm, people would say we were married. Blush at the thought of cooties, but praise, congratulate us anyways. Shout to the teachers who'd smile and yell, "Happy for you two!" Show love for this unplanned thing. But on the bus, our feet just swung. Back and forth, Velcro peeled parts of my calf as her legs flexed, then relaxed. An odd crave surge with each scuff against raw skin. A slight break only when she asked me to scratch the spot on her back. Yes. Where again? Fingernail painted a deep blue from the sleepover we'd had 2 nights before. She tapped a spot in the air just below her shoulder blade that, in 8 years, her bra would cover. She kept her finger there and tried to itch it herself, but couldn't reach. She needed me to do it for her. Her mother put the nail polish on the counter, told us we got 1 bag of popcorn, a soda each, and 1 movie before bedtime. Said if we weren't sure how to glaze cobalt coats of femininity on our chewed keratin claws, that she'd be happy to help. Crusted crimson nail polish on an edge of skin overlapped her mother's pointer fingernail as she slid the bottle toward us, eager to watch us conform. We hid our hands beneath the table. Her palm found mine in panic, so I wrapped my fingers around her knuckles while her mother set newspaper down to prevent perverted blots on her pristine, conventional countertop. After her mother left the room, after she stained our nails with gooey gloss, we curled paper under our tongues, small, rolled-up pieces from the bottle's label. We let them melt in our saliva, then spat them into each other's hands and watched the gel of polish ruin. I faced my body towards her back and sat on my knees, raised my hand to lift the shirt her brother used to wear. I skimmed the shirt against her skin and lingered at the way her back looked. Smooth, like how a naked Barbie felt in the crook of my elbow, hair cut short because we didn't have a Ken, so the ugliest girl had to be the boy. The itch intensifying, she urged me to hurry. I pressed my finger to her skin, a porcelain dimple surfaced, but I didn't scratch. I let the itch fester, never quite sure whether or not I could make it stop, never quite sure if I wanted it to. Okay, this is from my second piece, titled again, Intense Garage Fire Kills a Sandy Father. My mother's shaking fingers covered her mouth all of breakfast. She only removed them, hand hitting swirled wood of kitchen table when she raised a spoon to separate her cracked lips. A block away, the sizzle of painted timber and shackled roof slowed, extinguished in heavy air filled with girly whimpers wedged in cupped palms and a slight smell of blistered flesh. A hose lay coiled on the grass of the house next door. Water leaked from its rounded mouth as the neighbor spoke to the local newspaper, describing his failed attempt to douse a burning man. Like using a squirt gun on a bonfire, his wife said, and closed her eyes at the memory. Mom wanted to help, suggested we cook something, bring it over, then covered her mouth again, said never mind through knuckles, and left the room, cereal bloating and milk still on the table. Thank you.
My name's Nate. This is a submission for graduate creative nonfiction. Excerpt from a story entitled Another Out. Can you all hear me? Is that all right? Lean forward, doing the hunching thing. All right. Cordova sat on the general issue mattress, laughing at the TV screen. Dumb laughs, like giggles from a deadhead who crossed to the other side too many times and never made it back. The 2 empty bottles of Glenlivet in his trash can hadn't been there the week before. I sat across the barrack room staring into my laptop. If Google hadn't existed, I never would have known the difference between synthetic and downfill sleeping bags, or the culinary versatility of the 9-inch titanium backpack and spoon. The first week's home had been celebratory, but they'd quickly taken on a self-destructive arc. There was a darkness that a partying couldn't shake. No one said anything about it because no one knew what it was. Ambien and alcohol were popular. Valium and Percocet pills crushed and snorted. We turned from motivated, bloodthirsty teenagers to shell-shocked cynics in one trip across the globe. We'd seen what happens when humanity turns. Cordova had the frame of a fighter, all right angles and sharp lines. His gray eyes cut deep, and he always had an amused way about him, raising his eyebrows and laughing at me when he realized that I questioned his excessive drinking. I'd seen him chew a cell phone to pieces and drive off base with half a fifth under his belt. It only pointed in one direction, but fuck it. We each needed our own way out. I completely dissociated. I stayed present enough to fill a pair of boots and make it to the occasional medical screening. Otherwise, I was gone. Where? The hills of Appalachia, the frozen tundra of Alaska. All the time I'd spent overseas with my head in adventure books had shaped my inner world. The stories helped me escape a version of reality that I constantly struggled to keep tucked neatly into a coherent context. Eventually, it just became easier to give that up, the making sense of things. There was a tragic innocence to it. The boy lives in the adventurous world, a world where the intrepid never know what's around the next bend. It's preferable to his real world, a place where he knew it didn't matter what was around the next bend, a place where EFPs melted through engine blocks as easily as they did bodies. Suddenly, Cordova threw his Xbox controller onto the ground, sending it crashing across the tile in a half-dozen pieces. He had infantile sensibilities but gorilla-like strength, and giggled when he'd seen what he'd done. Oh, he cried, standing up before throwing himself face first onto the bed. He did a sort of eagle-like screech in response. We long ago devolved to communicating without words. What was the point? We didn't socialize anymore either. Our Friday nights were better spent in the surreal funhouse ambiance of the barracks than in the post-deployment drama enveloping the greater Fort Riley area. We tried to blend in with the civilian population at first, wearing their clothes and frequenting their businesses. We couldn't help but feel like wolves draped in lambskins, 10 feet tall and covered in blood. The locals had heard the rumors. They'd overheard drunken conversations of decapitations and brain matter, torture houses with skinning tables and bloody drill bits, fragments of skull matter and grizzled, dried to antique metal shanks. They'd heard of the fields of decomposing corpses, hands bound, and shot execution style, glowing white hot under the gaze of infrared lenses. They'd read in the local papers that we'd taken casualties, whispered amongst themselves that we'd come home with 93 less than we'd left, that in an EFP attack, the wounded were considered the unlucky ones, well-placed shrapnel viewed as preferable to the slow roast of flames, and that after enough time, the tragic repetition of combat would cast a bleak pall over even the hardiest soldiers' eyes. Thanks.
Is this one also on? Okay. I'm Meili Stokes. This is an undergrad fiction piece called And Thus the Hunters. Because of this subject matter, I need to quickly break the rules and just acknowledge Ashley Hallstrom. She was a trans woman from this community who took her own life at the end of last year. So this is for her. I really hope our world is becoming more understanding and kind. I think with you people here it is. Okay. This is a couple pages in. V and I were exchanging elbow jabs when Cleo hissed in her low voice, "Look." A bunched village of juniper bushes grew to the left of us. They trembled. A branch cracked. V gripped my knee, her lips apart. The junipers stilled. We waited. A purplish shape pressed between the fronds. Another crack and we felt that whatever it was vanish. V yowled a war cry and broke through the low limbs of our evergreen hideout, spraying needles. Cleo and I leapt after her, clambered over the snow and shoved through the junipers. I screeched, and when Cleo did too, the sound broke me apart. We tumbled and huffed, yelping on occasion to keep the energy circling, until we neared some roads and the old squatting pub. Cleo collapsed into the snow that bruised darker now beneath the creeping evening. V and I dropped too to gasp on our backs, hidden in the steaming indents our bodies made at the end of the fresh trail of massacred snow. Lying there, A memory crossed my vision, and I saw the unicorn, part made of light. Buried behind holly, turning its head towards me, its limbs began to whisper forward. My eyes cleared, and I shifted onto my side in the snow. It wasn't a unicorn, I said. A unicorn wouldn't run from us. Jay said, we know what Jay said. Cleo's voice rung out low and final. She turned away, a dark curve bundled in a black coat that clung so tight it became a part of her. She looked to me like the dark space between galaxies. I stared too long, then closed my eyes. Our triplet breaths formed clouds just out of rhythm. The earth moved quick and old beneath our backs. Cleo kept a list, penciled above her bed, of all the black trans women murdered since 1970. She only talked to me about it once, both of us buzzing with the midnight coffee we'd snuck by shouldering through the food center's window. Our faces lit in the cool tones of my cheap phone screen. I need to name them, she said, and I used their real names, Lonnie, not the names their parents gave them. She paused for long seconds between phrases. I tried to look into her eyes, a color somewhere between indigo and soil that they kept just left of connecting with mine. I wanted to cover her slender hand with my own, which pudged out too big, the color of wet sand. I wanted to cup her sharp cheek in my palm and transfer to her some of my warmth. She often looked cold. She always felt too distant to approach. I kept opening my mouth as if to say the perfect words, but each time they caved into uncomfortable yawns. Her long finger traced the nearest name. It works out to one killed every 3 days. She didn't mention Jay. I didn't mention Jay, but I imagined Jay, broad, black, and gleaming, beaming, adjusting her false breasts. I begged her silently to be anywhere but gone. Thank you.
I'm Sophie Buckner, and this is creative nonfiction undergraduate. I have my dad's smile. That is the one thing that makes having a smile like mine bearable. He died 5 years ago, and it's nice to have something of his with me always. It's too bad his smile was thin-lipped and lopsided. But I guess getting his smile was better than getting his big hooked nose. But then a nose isn't so bad. Noses are supposed to be awkward and ugly. Ever focus on only someone's nose? And what about Barbra Streisand? Her honker became her signature. But a smile is supposed to be beautiful. It's supposed to be what a person falls in love with, what captures people's trust and loyalty. At 10:40 a.m. on January 15th, 1947, an anonymous call came into the LA police. Officers Frank Perkins and Wayne Fitzgerald arrived at the address given by the anonymous caller. In a grassy field in plain view of the street, Officers Perkins and Fitzgerald found a naked body, severed at the torso. Small chunks of flesh had been hacked out, and the body was completely white and drained of blood. The deceased woman's mouth was sliced at the corners into a gruesome smile. This case became known as the Black Dahlia murder. It was never solved. The Black Dahlia's legal name was Elizabeth Short, but her real name was swallowed up in the nickname given her while still alive due to her dark wardrobe. The name Black Dahlia fed the rumors of scandal and smut about her life, which soon filled newspapers and magazines after her body was found. She was a prostitute. She went home with a different man, married or single, every night. But other accounts, not so popular with the press at the time, say she was a good girl, just trying to get a break into the movie business. She was quiet and innocent. One of the only certainties about the Black Dahlia is that she was beautiful. The pictures show a young woman with brown curls, light eyes, and a white smile framed with thick, dark lips. What was that beautiful, dark smile hiding, though? Was the gruesome smile carved into her face a better depiction of the woman she was inside? Or did the post-mortem smile distort the smile of a pure young woman? What did Short do to get herself mixed up with someone who was capable of such an atrocious crime? TeethWhiteningReviews.com rates the top best female celebrity smiles. Jessica Alba tops the list with golden proportions and looks good at every angle. Number 2 is Bridget Moynihan, whose smile works beautifully with her facial features. Scarlett Johansson is number 4. Notice how her plump lips frame the smile beautifully. This is an important feature in a female smile. Julia Roberts is clear down at number 9 because wine and coffee have finally gotten to Julia's smile. Her times are over in reaching the top ranks of smile ubiquity. But Julia's smile still beats Megan Fox's, sitting at number 10, whose small laterals give her a feminine look, but who has a misshapen gum line. My mother, put me in dance classes for the majority of my childhood. I wasn't very talented, but I still enjoyed the lessons. Once, when I was about 11, my dance squad was in a competition. My instructor told us that we should try to smile as big as we could, and whoever had the best smile would get a prize. I hated my smile, but I wanted that prize. The night before the performance, I sat myself down in front of the mirror and practiced my smile, remembering Mom's advice to poof my lips out. I struggled to push my lips forward while stretching the scrawny things into a wide, toothy smile. I couldn't do anything about my squinty eyes and chubby cheeks, but I managed to create a thin line of pink surrounding my teeth. I was pleased with myself and was confident I would win the smiling competition. When my squad performed the next day, I smiled as big as I could throughout the whole routine, but the prize was given to Lynette Richardson.
Okay. So my name's Mckenzie, and I'm going to be reading a couple of poems for you, and this is in the graduate category. I don't know what that means. Yeah?
Just a little bit closer, because you're
Like
quiet.
this. I'm also very short, so it's not my fault. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. This first one is called Surgery. I will break down your bones until they dazzle and pop and rattle. I will make the bruise turn and twist, purple to green, then fading out like our song in the background. I will resurrect everything you forgot you knew about sunrise, about migraine headaches, about eating in your car alone. I will not hold the knife like they do in some love poems, crouching adagio over your last words to me in a small, nearly wordless text message. I will not stay out looking for you in forgotten emails or overgrown trails because I know you will not be there. I will probably look you up on Google Maps. I will not drive past your house though, just stay in your orbit. Circle the city blocks within a 10-mile radius. The nearness of you will drip through the car speakers. With this poem, I will shake your heart from its cage until you remember me too. And then this last one is called In Low of Flowers I Write This Poem. I was working on a sequence of math equations when my mother called. She told me you killed yourself the night before on your brother's swing set. The last time I saw you, you reminded me of a supernova, bending, expanding, then smash, collapsing in on your doomed self. I wish I could say it wasn't beautiful. Leaving the library in a stabbing fury, I mounted my bike, knowing my legs would be worthless. The absence of tears was blinding. How dare you? Why would you? I said to nobody, I guess. I felt like a greeting card that's blank inside. Should I say something to your mother? To myself? Get well soon. My condolences. Pay better attention. Lock the kitchen drawer next time.
I pedaled across the cement until it melted with the heat, turning into flat galaxies as I rode, trying to meet you again one more time. Without ceremony or liturgy or note, you left me riding this bike under a sweltering blanket of madness, which I kept to myself then and I carry it now. Do you know how supernovas leave us? In a blinding burst of light, they stretch out, yawning massively, goodbye, good night, and for a brief moment, a new star seems to appear. That's it.